So in the activity before this lesson, we discovered that the volume of a pyramid and a cone is just 1/3 the volume of what I would call the full shape. So for instance, the equivalent to a pyramid in prism form would be a rectangular prism. So that means the volume of the pyramid is just 1/3 of that, or that volume divided by 3. For a cone, the equivalent prism form of a cone would be a cylinder, and the volume of the cone is just 1/3 the volume of its equivalent cylinder. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a closer look at a pyramid. So the general form for the volume, it's going to be the area of the base times the height divided by 3. But if you want to be a little bit more specific about a square pyramid, well, the dimensions we know on a square pyramid, the base is just length and width. But since it is a square base, we know that the length equals the width. And then the height of the pyramid is the height as though it's going straight through the point. Okay, so the base of my square pyramid is a square. And the third dimension that we use to describe the pyramid is the height. Okay, so when I'm finding the volume, if I want to be more specific about this formula, the area of the base is length times width. We're going to multiply that by the height of the pyramid and divide that by 3. So the volume is length times width times height divided by 3. Or you might see it as 1/3 length times width times height. Both of those are actually the same thing. It's just two different ways of seeing it. So now let's take a look at an example. All right, so the first example is just a basic pyramid problem. We have our length and we have our width. And the height we're going to use is the 8 inches because that is the height that goes directly down. So my base of my pyramid is a square. And the height I'm going to use is the height that goes straight down like that. All right, so to find the volume, it's the area of the base, so length times width times the height of the pyramid divided by 3. So the volume is 6 times 6 times 8 divided by 3. So that volume is going to be 96, and my units are inches cubed. All right, for number 2, or the second example, again, I have my square base, and I have my length and my width. The height I'm going to use is this height, the height that goes straight through the middle. So to find my volume, it's going to be 2 times 2 times 3. And since it's a pyramid, we're dividing by 3. So the volume should be 4 centimeters cubed. So now let's take a look at an example of working backwards. So this problem says a square pyramid has a volume of 180 inches cubed and a height of 15 inches. What is the length of each side of the base? All right, so this is a working backwards problem. The reason I know it's a working backwards problem is because we were given the volume and we're working backwards to find some type of other dimension. Okay, so the formula for volume of a pyramid is length times width times height divided by 3. So now we're just going to plug in what we know. I'm given the volume, so that's going to be plugged in for the volume, and I'm given the height, so that's going to be plugged in for h. Okay, remember that in a square base pyramid, the length and the width are the same. So if we're solving for each side of the base, we can just call them both sides x. Okay, the height goes straight down to the middle. We know that that's 15. So now we're just going to plug in what we know. So the length and the width is just x in this case. So plugging in what we know, the volume is 180. Length and width is x and x, so x times the height, which is 15, divided by 3. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, we just need to solve for x. So first thing you should do is take a look at these numbers, and if you can divide them, you should divide them. So 15 divided by 3 is actually just 5. So 15 divided by 3 is 5, and x times x is x squared. So this becomes 5x squared. So 15 divided by 3 is 5 equals 180. Okay, now we just need to get x by itself. Well, this is 5 times x squared, so to undo the 5 times, we divide both sides by 5. So 180 divided by 5 is 36. And now we have x squared. And now we just need to get rid of this exponent of 2, and the way we do that is by taking the square root of both sides. So x equals 6. So since this is a word problem, we're going to write a word answer. So each side of the base is 6 inches. Okay, so now let's take a look at these you try examples. Okay, so number 1 is just a basic finding the volume of a pyramid. Okay, so there's my square base. The height I'm going to use is 22 feet. So to find the volume, it's just length times width, so 30 times 30 times the height, which is 22. And since it's a pyramid, a pointy shape, we're going to divide by 3. So you should get 6,600 feet cubed. So length times width times height divided by 3. All right, let's look at the second you try. So this is a composite figure. Okay, it's made up of 2 shapes. It's made up of a pyramid on top, and it's made up of a prism on the bottom. Okay, so it's 2 separate shapes. So let's first take a look at the pyramid on top. Here's my base. Okay, at first glance, it might look like we're missing some measurements, but this pyramid is just sitting perfectly on top of this prism. So this length right here is going to be the same as this. So the base of the pyramid is going to be 4, and same thing on this side. Okay, so the dimensions for the pyramid, the length and width are both 4, and the height is 2. All right, so try to find the volume of the pyramid. It's going to be 4 times 2, and don't forget we do need to divide by 3 since it's a pyramid. So that's going to be about 10.67. Okay, now looking at the prism on the bottom, the dimensions we need are the length, the width, and the height. And to find the volume of a prism, we just multiply those 3 numbers. So 4 times 6. Okay, we don't need to divide by anything since it's a prism. 4 times 6 is 96. So now to find the total volume, since it's a composite figure, we're just going to add those together. So 10.67 plus 96 should get 106.67 centimeters cubed. Okay, so now let's take a look at cones. So the volume for a cone is similar to a square pyramid. The only difference is how you find the area of the base. So the general form for the volume of a cone is going to be the area of the base times the height of the cone divided by 3. So more specifically for a cone, our base is a circle, And the dimension we use to find the area of the circle is the radius. And then we use the height of the cone when going through the apex of the cone. And that's what we use to find the volume. Okay, so being more specific for the volume of a cone, the area of the base is pi r squared times the height of the cone divided by 3. So the volume is pi r squared times the height divided by 3. Or, sorry, I know you can hear my dog in the back room. So, or we can write it as 1/3 pi r squared times the height. Okay, so these two formulas mean the same thing. It's just kind of two different ways of showing it. All right, so now let's look at a couple examples here. Okay, so for the first one, I'm going to go ahead and highlight my base. I'm going to highlight my height. So the height I'm going to use is 4 inches. Okay, in this problem, we're given the diameter. Okay, the reason I know it's the diameter is because it goes all the way across the circle. So to get the radius, remember we just divide by 2. So 3.5 divided by 2 is 1.75. So my radius is 1.75. All right, so now to find the volume of this cone, remember it's pi r squared times the height divided by 3. So plugging in what we know, pi times 1.75 squared times the height, which is 4, divided by 3. So for this one, the answer in terms of pi, you're just going to multiply all the numbers. So 1.75 squared times 4, and then if you divide by 3, you should get about 4.08 pi. So there's my answer in terms of pi. So where we get the 4.08 is we do 1.75 squared times 4 divided by 3. You get 4.08 pi. Then to get my approximate answer, I just do 4.08 times 3.14, which you should get about 12.82 inches cubed. So anytime you're dealing with a problem involving pi, I do want your answer both in terms of pi and your approximate answer. All right, so let's look at the second example. So this one's a little bit tricky. Okay, so in looking at this one, let's first highlight our base. So here's my circle. I have my radius. Okay, the tricky part is the height that I need to use is this height right here. Okay, remember the height is the height going through the point of your cone straight down perpendicular to your base. In this case, this 18 represents what we call the slant height. So anytime you are given the slant height instead of the actual height, what you need to do is you need to use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the height. Okay, so here we have just a plain old right triangle. 18 is my hypotenuse. So using Pythagorean theorem, it's just going to be 7 squared plus h squared equals 18 squared. Remember Pythagorean theorem, your hypotenuse is always by itself. All right, so 7 squared is 49 plus h squared equals 18 squared, which is 324. Subtract 49 from both sides. So h squared is 275. And now we just take the square root of both sides. So we get that the height is approximately 16.58. Okay, so now that I have my height, now I can use the volume formula to find the volume. Okay, so volume is pi r squared times the height divided by 3 because it's a cone. So plugging in what we know, pi times 7 squared times the height that we found, 16.58, divided by 3. Okay, so my answer in terms of pi, you're just going to take all the numbers. So 7 squared is 49. 49 times 16.58, and then divide by 3. If you put that in your calculator, you get 270.81 pi. And since there are no units listed, we're just going to say units cubed. Then to get my approximate, you're just going to do 270.81 times 3.14. You should get approximately 850.33 units cubed. So there's my answer in terms of pi, and this is my approximate answer. Okay, now let's look at a working backwards example. So they say the volume of a cone is 162 pi centimeters cubed, and the height is 6. What is the radius? Okay, so I'm just going to fill in my picture what we know. Here's my base. Okay, we know that the height is 6. And we know that the total volume is 162 pi. Okay, so taking the volume formula, so the volume of a cone is pi times the radius squared times the height divided by 3. We're just going to plug in what we know. So in this problem, we're given the volume, which we're going to plug in for the volume, and we're given the height, which we're going to plug in for the height. And we're solving for the radius. Okay, so it's going to be 162 pi equals pi radius squared times the height, which is 6, divided by 3. All right, so if you remember from a couple days ago when we did these working backwards problem, when you have a pi on both sides, they cancel out because you could divide by pi on both sides, and in both cases they'll cancel out. Okay, so what we're left with is 162 equals r squared times 6 divided by 3. And then if you remember in the pyramid example, we first looked to see if we could divide these, and if you can, you should. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this side becomes 2r squared. And now we can finish solving for r. So to get r by itself, we're going to divide by 2. 162 divided by 2 is 81. And last step to get r by itself, we take the square root of both sides. So the radius is 9. So the radius of the cone is 9 centimeters. Okay, let's look at the U-try problems here. All right, so the one on the left, okay, we have our circular base, and the height we need is this one. So in this problem, again, we are given the slant height, which means we need to use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the height. So using Pythagorean theorem, it's going to be 3 squared plus h squared equals 7 squared. So this becomes 9 plus h squared equals 49. And then we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. So h squared is 40. Then we take the square root of both sides, so you get that the height is approximately 6.32 meters. So now that we have the height, now we can go ahead and solve for the volume. So the volume is pi times the radius squared times the height divided by 3. So it's going to be pi times 3 squared, and the height we're going to use is a 6.32. divided by 3. All right, to get your answer in terms of pi, just focus on the numbers. So 3 squared is 9 times 6.32 divided by 3. When you put that in your calculator, you should get 18.96 pi meters cubed. And then to get the approximate, we're just going to do 18.96 times 3.14, which gives you approximate volume of 59.53 meters cubed. Okay, let's look at the second one. So the second one is a composite figure. It's made up of a cone on top and a cylinder on the bottom. So now we can find the volume of both. So I'm going to first look at the cone on top. We have our base. The height that we're going to use is this height. And in this case, we don't need to use Pythagorean theorem because we're given the height that we need, not the slant height. So finding the volume of the cone, it's going to be pi times the radius, which is 7 squared, times the height, divided by 3. All right, my answer in terms of pi, you're going to do 7 squared times 7 divided by 3. You should get about 114.33 pi. So I'm going to wait to get my approximate answer because I'm going to get that at the very end. So that's the volume of the top. The volume of the bottom, it's a cylinder. So I'm just going to keep that base highlighted because it has our dimensions, it has our radius, and it has our height. So to find the volume of the cylinder, it's pi times the radius squared times the height of the cylinder. The height of the cylinder is 6. All right, so my answer in terms of pi, 7 squared times 6, you should get 294 pi. All right, so to find my total volume, I'm just going to add those together. So 114.33 pi plus 294 pi, you get 408.33 pi feet cubed. So the reason you can add these together is because they are both in terms of pi. If you had one in terms of pi but the other approximate, you couldn't add them together. So these are like terms. If you wanted, you could find the approximate for the cone and the approximate for the cylinder and then add those two together if you wanted. You'd get the same answer. All right, so for my approximate, I'm just going to do 408.33 times 3.14, which you should get about 1,282.16 feet cubed. Okay, now I'm going to go over a few of the practice problems. So number 3, this is a pyramid. I have my base, and I have my height. So the volume of my pyramid is going to be 5 times 5 times 4 divided by 3. So 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 4 is 100. And then we have 100 divided by 3. You get an approximate volume of 33.33 feet cubed. Okay, number 6. This one is a cone. So I have my base. And for this one, I do have the appropriate height. It's the height that I need. So I don't need to use Pythagorean theorem. However, I am given the diameter. So remember, to get the radius, we just divide by 2. So my radius is 3. So the volume of this is going to be pi times 3 squared times my height divided by 3. So 3 squared is 9, and 9 times 10. So to get my answer in terms of pi, we just look at the numbers. So 9 times 10 is 90 divided by 3. You get 30 pi. meters cubed. And then to get my approximate, we do 30 times 3.14, which is about 94.2 meters cubed. All right, number 7. So it says a drill is used to cut out a cone-shaped hole from a rectangular prism. Find the volume of the remaining solid. So this is a composite figure, but instead of adding the two volumes, we're actually going to subtract the area of the cone, since that is a hole being drilled out of the cone. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the volume of the rectangular prism. And the way we find the volume of a rectangular prism is we do length times width times height. So the volume is just going to be 6 times 6 times 6, which is 216. And then we're going to find the volume of the cone. So the cone has a diameter of 4, which means my radius is 2, and the height of the cone is the same height as the height of the prism. So my height is going to be 6. So to find the volume of the cone, it's going to be pi times the radius squared times the height, and this one we need to divide by 3 since it's a cone. So my answer in terms of pi, 2 squared times 6 divided by 3, we get 8 pi. Okay, and since the volume of my rectangular prism is not in terms of pi, I need to get the approximate answer of this. Remember, you can only subtract them if they're like terms, so I need to get the approximate. So 3 times 8.14, or sorry, 8 times 3.14 is an approximate volume of 25.12. So now to find my total volume, we're just going to do the volume of the rectangular prism, which is 216, minus the volume of the cone-shaped hole, 25.12. So 216 minus 25.12, we get 190.88 centimeters cubed.